Is your safety net killing your scale? In other words, as companies grow, decisions feel like they could cost more, break more, expose more. So many leaders start avoiding the hardest business growth decisions, not because they don't see them, because they just don't want to be wrong. CEO delays quietly cost them later. And what happens when that market moves faster than their comfort level allows? It's technology and AI today, and all kinds of things happening. Most founder led CEOs don't realize that that new risk management hat that they're wearing is actually an expensive death sentence for innovation. Today, Jason Kroll reveals how to break the cycle of overthinking and move back into the winner circle. I'm Doug C. Brown. This is the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Let's dive right in. Hey, Jason, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate the invite.
Folks, I'm super excited to have this conversation. So, Jason, we're going to talk about really the ups and downs, the triumphs, the pitfall, all the stuff that happened when you were building your company, and how we made, or I should say, how you made the company grow in revenue, profit margins, all of that. Um, I loved what you had said. We were talking just prior to folks, and Jason was telling me how the company started. So why don't we start there? The company name is BankW,
Staffing.
Staffing, and so it's at folks. You can look it up, BankW Staffing.com. We'll put that
Correct.
in the show notes. You guys started out back in what was it, 2005, right? With three of you?
Yeah, so the original company was KBW Financial Staffing and Recruiting. And again, we were fairly thin in marketing, clearly all the way to the holding company, which is BankW, which is really just the partner's initials. Like we did not put a lot of money into branding. And so KBW was me and my two business partners. We left a larger, Fortune 500 type of staffing company and struck out and started a company up in Bedford, New Hampshire. And we laugh about it because, being ignorant or being stupid, really, for being honest, was a blessing for us because we started the company with three people in a room with $36,000. And we still kid around about it to this day, where we spent 10% of our operating budget on staffing software that we bought, deployed it, realized it wasn't going to work, and sat in the trunk of our car. One of our cars, it was my car actually, for like 5 years until I dug it out one day. I think I sold the car or something and threw it in my attic. So we spent 10% of our operating budget like in 1 week and realized that we had made a mistake. So we were not exactly business plan ready when we did this. But yeah, to your point, we started in 2005. It was staffing and recruiting for accounting and finance. We launched it in Bedford, New Hampshire. And really, if you kind of walk through the timeline, and I'll do it quickly. You can stop me if I get boring on it. Which is, we started with finance and accounting. A couple years later, we got contacted by someone we had worked with back at another company and said, he was looking to leave and wanted to start a company. And we were dabbled in IT and were asked to do some IT searches. And he was a great IT recruiter and salesperson. So we ended up partnering with him and started our IT company, which is Alexander Technology Group. 2 years later, we convinced our first employee, who ended up being my business partner, who was one of the best admin, HR, legal guys we knew. And he was working for us in the finance and accounting group. We recruited him out of Philadelphia to come back to New England to work with us. And he ended up opening up our admin, HR, legal placement group. So we had three companies that were kind of co-owned and a really clunky, as it happens, right? Like we didn't, we were not spending a lot of money on lawyers. We just kind of opened up these companies. We're all sharing office space together and realized at some point, we have something here, but it's never scaling this way. It was a handshake deal and everything. We were all good friends. But really, in order to move money around properly and put it where it needed to go and deploy capital the right way, we needed a holding company structure that made sense. So with no marketing, we opened BankW Staffing. The partners went into the holding company. Everything that's not selling staffing services or recruiting went into the holding company. So human resources, kind of a shared service model. And the subs, the brands, so to speak, were open under the holding company. So that gets us through most of the last 20 years, with the two exceptions of we opened a sales placement company called Sales Search Partners. It was the first company we owned that didn't have a partner running it at the beginning. It was something we opened, as a co mingling with all the partners. And we did two small acquisitions. during that time period that were not minor for us. We've done a couple acqui-hires, but these were true corporate structures. We had to integrate employees, integrate software, integrate technology, integrate real estate, the whole nine yards. So that was a good experience. Again, we did that fairly bootstrapped, bank financing, cash, kind of ran through it. And really, though, both of those acquisitions, and we didn't realize it at the time, really helped catapult us into kind of a larger small company space where it really gave us that kind of heft. And I think at one point we had 160 employees. We're about 135 now. Um, so again, this is not giant companies, but certainly gave us a lot to manage. It was just a whole different structure for us than, a couple guys sitting in a room up in Bedford, New Hampshire.
So I have some questions because I love the story about the 10%, 10% of your operating budget spent on software. I've made
We
mistakes
still
like
make fun of it today.
yeah, but at that time it probably wasn't that fun, right? It was
It was not that funny. No, 10% of our operating budget gone. We still remember the little gopher running every time we tried to boot up the software. It
yep.
was a pretty big miss. It was a swing
So
and a miss.
one time I started a telecommunications auditing and consulting company and I had three partners and let's just put it this way. By the fourth month, all partners had left the company. I was making $1,500 a month, and I lost personally $60,000 because I put all the money in, right?
Into it, right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for that.
the reason I'm gonna, there's a point to this story, folks. So hang with me. And so, I was able to turn that around into a seven-figure company within 15 months of that point. But you guys have gone to 160 employees at the height. And you can look back on that and laugh now. But one of the things I think that you did, uh, maybe by choice or maybe just because you guys were you guys, right? At that time, is you really didn't overthink decisions.
That's putting it mildly. That's being very generous.
But I see that as a success point in the genesis of your company.
No doubt.
Where I see so many people today, they're overthinking and trying to, and I'm not saying don't think through things, but I wanted your feedback on this.
Yep.
CEOs in general or founder-led companies, do you think they're overthinking too much of what they're doing and then therefore they're just limiting themselves from implementing, which is where you really learn the stuff anyways?
So what happens in the cycle is at the beginning you have nothing to lose. I mean, you do have something to lose, but you don't think about it that way because there's not a lot of revenue, there's not a lot of profit, and especially depending where you are in the life cycle just of your life, you're not thinking about what do I have to lose. And then as success starts, risk management takes over because now you have something to lose, and that risk management piece can be the death of innovation if you don't manage it properly, if that makes sense. Because
Yep.
you do start wondering, I would never start a venture with $36,000 today. Like it wouldn't even occur to me to try to start a venture with 36,000. But back then it made complete sense to us. Like, why would we need any more money? Now, we're thinking about, just the lawyer bills alone today would cost us more than $36,000. So I
Mhm.
mean, it is a cycle of the more you feel you have to lose, the less likely you are if you can't force yourself out of that mindset to want to risk it doing something innovative. And I think that is common. I think it's more common. I don't think it's you change your mind just by time. I think that your kind of risk management hat starts to come on more and more. The first time you have an issue, we used to have $10,000 mistakes. Now we have six-figure mistakes,
Right.
right? So it's just a different scale. And so when that happens, you start to rethink things. Okay, how do I not lose $250,000 like I did last year on this thing? And you start to overthink it, and that can give you paralysis, really. You can really what a lot of times what you do is make no decision. And that sometimes is worse than making a decision, depending on what's going on.
All right. So I would agree with that. And maybe I'm not, maybe I'm a little unicornish on this one, but the older I get now, I kind of went the other way. It's like now I'm in my 60s and it's like, all right, so if I had to roll the dice on everything,
Right.
I'm rolling it, right?
Right. Well, I think there is a secondary piece to that, which is once you've had enough success, assuming you're not, you know, wasting all of your resources and all of your capital, there does become a certain level of, I'm okay now. I can afford to run hard on this. And if it doesn't work out, I'm not losing my house. There's that middle piece where you're worried about how am I going to get my kids through school and keep my house and my whatever my things I've locked myself into my life for. At the beginning, you don't have that. And to a certain extent, at the end, if you've done things right, you could afford to kind of go for it, knowing that there's a little bit of a safety net. So I think
Right.
most people aren't putting everything on roulette, on one color and just going for it and saying, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll be broke and start all over again. But you are less risk adverse to deploy capital if you feel like you've already kind of stabilized, kind of your core needs, I guess.
So that's a wonderful way of looking at it, and that's how I do look at it. So it's so through the let's say we're talking 21 years now, right? So
Yeah, coming up.
2005 to 2026. Through the 21 years, how many times do you think I had somebody ask this to me on a podcast once, and I found it an interesting question. How many times did you feel you won? And how many times comparatively do you feel you lost through those
Ooh.
21 years that got you to where you are success today?
It's kind of like golf. I only need a couple great shots to let me keep coming back and
Yeah.
thinking, you know what, this is good enough. I want to keep doing this.
Yep.
I can't keep track of the losses because it could be a little loss and they just add up to it. Sort of extent you almost stop thinking about them because you build them into what you're doing. But the big wins you remember, right? And a lot of them, there's wins and losses. We acquired a company, and you could argue that integration gave us huge momentum. It gave us some phenomenal employees. But if I look back on it and say, was it a successful integration? Probably over 4 years, we kept 20% of the staff of that business.
Okay.
And so someone might look at that and be like, wow, that's not a very successful integration. What did you guys do? I look at it and say, yeah, I could argue that part of that did not go very well. We were learning. That was the first time we'd ever done anything that large. It was the first time we really ever had to integrate both technology and people and real estate and reputations and branding and all the things that went with it. But at the same time, I can look back at that to this day, it was a win for us. We have a lot of great clients out of it. We have some phenomenal employees that did stay with us that came from that. So, I mean, I think it would depend on your perspective whether it was successful or not. We opened a small company, we bought a small company out in Western Mass. That gave us a new office. Was it successful the first year financially? Not by a long shot. We opened it right when the market turned in 2000, end of 2022, 2023, which is a very different staffing market than the preceding 3 years, which was like the best 3 years in staffing, since they invented staffing. And so that was a financially was by no measure would that have been a successful financial acquisition, certainly year one. But it also opened up the door to the western part of the state for us. We've gotten some great clients. We've brought in some great employees to work in that office. So I think in the long term, there's a win. In the short run, there are plenty of losses during that time period for certain. So again, a lot of it is time changes how you look at those wins and losses. And I think scale, one big win is worth a whole bunch of little losses, right? You put up with a lot of little losses to have the big win. And so we've had both. I'd argue there's more losses than wins, but the wins have been big.
Well, and that's that's I love what you said because one big win outweighs all the little losses or
Sure
all the
does.
losses, right? So
And if you don't have the losses, you're probably not trying hard enough,
there you
truthfully.
go. That's what I was just going to ask you. So,
Yeah, 100%.
Brian Scudamore was on this podcast, 1-800 Got Junk founder. And I asked him a question and he said, yeah, we tried to do franchising as our own corporate offices. Like we
Right.
did that and it was, didn't go well.
Isn't it the nice way we phrase things when it didn't go well? You'd love to see what really didn't go well behind the scenes. Um, I said if people saw the sausage making in our partner meetings, no one would ever come back when those things happen. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
That's great.
and it's one of those. So the message I'm trying to get across on this thing, Jason, is look, if we don't take certain risk, we never learn. Sometimes we've got to do things to experience them to find out whether or not we should have done it in the first place or not. Like I don't know if there's any substitute for that. Like
100%.
we can run things in simulators all day long, but then, when we get them out into the real world, it's like,
Correct.
oh, well, that marketing didn't really go the way the simulators said it was
E-
going to go.
Every plan we've executed on has not gone the way the plan was written. I mean, I think that's very common. But we've never had a plan where we said we're going to roll this out this way over 2 years, and it rolled out that way over 2 years. But what it does is open the door to opportunity, and you have to be kind of nimble enough to be able to take advantage of it and maybe pivot when that happens. And we certainly have done that with different things that, started out we thought were great ideas. They quickly turned into not so great ideas. But where the silver lining was, we took it and we ran with them. So I can think of a few times where that's happened.
So can we say something like action will always trump complacency because you'll find that silver lining somewhere?
If especially, I think everyone thinks the economy they're in or the time they worked was different than 20 years ago or the last generation. So everyone's going to always say that. But I'll guess I'll keep going with that statement and say, in the world we're in the economy we're in, if you're not moving forward, you are 100% going backwards. There's too much consolidation of businesses out there. There's too many moving parts. There's a lot of unknowns. So I think very few businesses can afford to kind of say, this is our core business model. We're going to be complacent. We're going to run it the same way we did 50 years ago or 30 years ago, or it's a family-owned business generationally. I think very few, there's probably some out there, very few can run complacently and just kind of keep the status quo and survive, I think, in this type of market, in this type of economy.
Yeah, and it's not the first time we've been here, right? So as you just said, because how many real estate bust and booms have we been through in our
Right.
lives, right? How many, I don't know, we had what? AIDS, SARS, MERS, pandemic, COVID, all these things that have happened.
I remember
Um,
coming in 2008 when the stock market would drop 250 points a day, talking about it, how would it affect the economy, what's going to do with our business. Now, a 250-point swing in the market, it doesn't even make the paper. You wouldn't even think about it, right? Just it's all to scale, right? It depends on the scale of what you're doing, and to a certain extent, you get used to it. 2008 hadn't happened for many, many years prior to that. You didn't see that level of kind of volatility in the stock market
right.
for a long, long time. So especially, I look at our business, 40% of my staff are under 30, under 35, let's say,
Yep.
30 to 35. And so when we came out of 2008, call it 2010 to 2011, let's say, to 2022, was a straight line, good to great market. So if you got out of college, you had never seen a bad market ever in your life if you were 21 to 32 years old, right? Because you would just never, by 2022, kind of the peak, that 21, 22 peak of the market, if you graduated in the preceding 10 years, you had never worked in a bad market. So I had gone through a couple of recessions, so I was kind of prepared a little bit for what eventually was going to happen. We have a lot of people that work for us that had only seen post-COVID business climate, right?
Right.
So I mean, it's just a lot of it is just your perspective and what you're used to. So you try to explain to someone who's 27 years old that the market is going to turn eventually. This is not always going to be like this, and they look at you like you're a dinosaur. Like,
Yep.
sure, okay, well, that's great. Well, I don't know what that means, but and sure enough, when it started to get a little bit harder, they figured it out, and it was very hard for a lot of people to make that pivot to a very different market.
My youngest daughter was 6 or 7 years old, and the iPhone 4 just had come out.
Right.
So, of course, I'm a tech company back then. We're going to go buy the latest
Of course.
technology, right? Also a dumb move, by the way. I never had to spend that much on a phone, right? But I bought everybody in the company and I got my kids iPhone 4s. And we're driving down the highway, and my daughter, who was I think 6.5-ish, looks up at me and she goes, "Dad, this thing's cool." And she's like bopping around on the phone, just making it work. And I'm
Right.
like, "I'm glad you're having a good time." She goes, "Dad, how old were you when you got your first cell phone?" And
Yeah,
I
right.
said, well, honey, I think I was 28.
Right.
And Jason, she looked at me like I was a dinosaur. Like
Sure.
her brain couldn't comprehend that, right? So to your point where people who have been in this post-pandemic world and they've
Yeah.
never, have experienced it, things always cycle, folks, no matter where you are. They always
This
have
is
through, at least through my
this
life, I've seen it.
absolutely.
And so the question, and I think you're the guy to answer this question, How do you get your mind wrapped around that there's going to be forever change and that how do we roll with it and make it an asset versus having it like punch us in the gut?
Right. I think you have to truly believe, and I really do believe, that there are positives in every single one of these events. There's always a way to make it better or to advance your business or your personal or professional life during these, call it crisis for lack of a better phrase. 2008 was not a great market. Our organization grew 2008 because we were smaller and we were nimble and we could be very responsive to clients. We were hyper local. So we were working, with a smaller group. We weren't trying to keep a national book of business together. We were working in 4 states, in New England. And we used that time to really hunker down and be super responsive to our clients. And as we came out of that market, people remembered us. We were there during a downturn. We took people's phone calls. And we talked to people who were having a really tough time finding a job and answered their messages. And that, without a doubt, helped carry us from that kind of run from 2000, call it 10 to 2022, where I mean, again, if you were really disciplined business, but I think most businesses, once the market really heated up, it's really hard to make sure you're not becoming transactional, right? There's
Mm.
so much business. It's easy to kind of forget who your core business is, who your core clients are. It's easy to change your pricing structure because it's so busy. And we tried really very, very hard. We weren't perfect, but very hard to remember, like, this is where we came from. This worked. Don't let this overheated market change what we're doing because it's not going to be that way forever. And I think for the most part, if I think back on that time period, it was not that long ago, as we switched from 2022 being a really, I would still call it a fairly overheated market, at least through halfway through the year, to 23, where I think everyone agreed the brakes kind of went on. There's no more stimulus money. There's
Right.
a lot more talk about value and a lot more talk about being cautious, and job offers weren't going out by the dozens to people because they were just trying to hang on to whoever they could, et cetera, et cetera. If I had to go back, like, what mistakes did I make from the carry through from 22 to 23 and beyond? It was thinking that the growth that we had happened over that 3 or 4 years, which is substantial for our company, could be sustained. In my head, I thought the growth wouldn't go up at the same rate it would, but I thought sustaining it wouldn't be that hard.
Yep.
And we went into 2023 with way too many employees, with way too many kind of, I don't call it complacency, but certainly thought that, yeah, we'd have a slowdown in growth and maybe even go backwards a smidge, but nothing dramatic because we'd already accomplished all these things and there's no reason to think it would go backwards. And me and my one of my partners, co-CEO of the company, and we talked about it. I was like, okay, this strategy is going to work. We're going to go in heavy. We're going to train all these new people we just hired, and we're going to come out of this stronger than ever. And what really happened was we had a whole bunch of people that weren't prepared to work in a tougher economy, and many of them stayed and did a great job. And like I said, we didn't lose that many people, but we certainly had too many people that were not prepared to work in what was a substantially harder market. And we're trying to recreate the results they had in 2022 the same way they did in
Yep.
23, and did not go well, unfortunately, for a lot of people.
That's a
Um,
great learning lesson for everybody. And folks, with AI in here now, you're going to go through this again, whether you want
sure,
to or not.
absolutely.
So
I think it's a longer burn than people are saying,
yeah,
meaning it's going to take longer. Everyone's using AI. Most companies aren't using it to scale, to lower, and to affect and mass productivity, meaning there's people that are using it to become very much more productive. I use it every day, and it certainly has made me more productive. Most companies yet, at least smaller businesses, middle-sized businesses, I don't think have figured out a way to scale, reduce staff by 8% because AI is doing that work. I have not seen that yet, and maybe it's going to come faster than I think. I do think it's coming on certain jobs, especially jobs with a lot of data and a lot of repetition,
yeah,
where one person can find the variances that the AI can't do, but 80% of it can be done by AI. So you don't need 4 people to do that job. Claims intake, things like that, where there's a lot of the same work being done. It's very detailed. It's very what's the right word? It's something that's repeatable, so the AI knows what it is. You could use it to know what it is 80% of the time. You need a
Yeah.
human to kind of catch the mistakes and retrain so it doesn't happen again. I think those jobs will definitely see a decrease in numbers. But to your point, I don't know. I don't think it's there yet.
No, and it's, I do a lot of reading on this, and I know a lot of AI companies, and they all tout the same thing. I remember back in 1999 when we went from dial-up internet to DSL, right? It
Yeah.
was kind of standardized. And I went to people and I said, "This is going to change how we sell forever." And all of them said, "You're out of your mind," right?
Right.
And I'm like, "No, no, no, think about it. The person now can get the information that they rely on us as the expert."
Well, you've hit on a really important point. The selling is different now because the information's already out there. When you're talking to a prospect, they're probably more prepared for this call than you are at this point,
Yes,
depending on what
yes.
they're doing, on what you're selling. They've already done the research. They probably already know your pricing structure. They probably already know a whole bunch more about what you would think you would need to sell them on by the time. They're very, very much a more educated consumer, for certain.
Yeah, and I actually just read a stat this morning that said that guys like you, CEO founders, guys like you, now realize that only about 23% of the salespeople coming through actually understand, and you rely on them for a strategy or strategic decision making.
Yeah.
Where back in 1999, it was way higher. Like it was, right?
I think that's probably true. I don't know the percentages, but I think that's right. And I think now a lot of your time is it's come full circle. It's relationships, right? In our world, delivery. They've been calling every time a new technology comes out, someone calls the death of the recruiting industry. Like ever since Monster Board came out, right?
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
said, what job boards are here? The recruiting are gone. Then LinkedIn was going to kill recruiting. If you look on LinkedIn, the majority of advertising and work being done on LinkedIn is by recruiting firms. I
Yep.
don't know if that's technically majority, but certainly a large portion of it. And so you're in telecom. I always try to use the last mile theory. The AI bot yet has not convinced you not to take a counteroffer or what the advantages are of this job. And until that happens, there's going to be a role for recruiting. But what has changed is the delivery time and speed and access to people that we never had before. When I started in this industry, we were faxing resumes and we were calling people through the yellow pages, right?
Yep.
That sales process and that delivery process has changed dramatically because of technology. But it still hasn't killed off the industry. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime. So I guess we'll
I,
see
I
how the AI bots continue to get better.
I think if you're like an umpire in a certain sport, like I don't know, do they even have umpires? Not umpires, but the people that oversee golf, right?
Right.
Like you're probably going to have drones in the sky looking to make sure nobody's
Already.
cheating, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I think
Already.
those type of things will, but I think you said something earlier, which is during the time where you were hyper focused in these four states, that you and your company was super responsive, like to the human being.
Correct.
And that will never be replaced by AI.
100%.
And that to me is a thread of success that I think too many companies right now, I just talked to one, they're generating thousands and thousands and thousands of leads to an offer. And when somebody takes the intro bump offer, there's zero human follow-up.
Right.
And they have a huge drop off of people.
Sure.
And the thing is, what I want people to understand by what I'm saying is, and what we're talking about, Jason, is we don't sell to titles, we don't sell to roles. We're selling to human beings who just happen to have a title. They still have
Correct.
wants, needs, human desires, human needs. I don't think that's going away.
Right. I used to do a kind of a joke training years ago where I'd say those boxes out there, those companies are boxes, but in those boxes, they're actual people. And forget about the logo that's on the box. You didn't get to know the people that work inside the box because that is going to be where all the magic happens. And that is really what you have to focus on, not what is the company. You have to know what they do to be able to sell, strategically. But the important piece is getting to know the people and what they're looking for. I get sales calls every day. I get emails, I get texts, I get phone calls every single day. People trying to sell me stuff. The ones that get through are the ones that know enough about what I'm looking for and know what I'm doing, where their value proposition is really easy in the first minute, right? They understand my pain points because they've either know me from a different time period, right? They've known or they've known enough about my business from doing real research and learning like what was going on, where they could capture my interest. And I'm always surprised when someone does it because it doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
But when they do, um, it's kind of it reminds me how important that relationship piece is, but also just understanding your client versus trying to take, whatever you're doing and forcing it down a group of people. You're really now, it really is about kind of this, I hate to say, bespoke, right? But to a certain extent, it's like you need to know your client's pain point and you need to be able to figure out if your product or service can solve their problem. And if it does, I think you have a really good sales process. If you were trying to say, I have this great thing and you should buy it, and let me just, keep hammering out there until I eventually get it in front of you, it's a tough sell right now. Especially now where, when I started in this business, everyone was in an office and everybody answered the phone at their desk. Those days are over now. I mean, those are not, you can't do sales the way we did 20 years ago. It is a
No.
completely different animal. And to a certain extent, our clients in a lot of cases are also similar to our new employees who are a little more adverse to the phone. They're a little more, I think, the relationship building is very different. Where we used to go out and meet people and have lunch and have a drink and go out and meet them and entertain socially a ton. There's a lot more online. There's a lot more social media going on, which, is tough for people of my generation to kind of understand how that is a real relationship. But we have a whole younger group of people that are working now that really view like a LinkedIn connection as I have a relationship with this person. And in my head, I'm like, I can't even. So there's a lot of mishmash of trying to take all the new and still hold the core of that kind of true relationship building. I used to use the example, if you go out at 7 o'clock at night to the grocery store and you run into your client, do they recognize you? Out of context. If the answer is yes, I think you're in good shape. If the
Right.
answer is they have no idea who you are when you walk by them in the grocery store, we have more work to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put the hammer on the head of the nail because the human relationships are never going to go away. One of the things about traveling that I've noticed is that humans, no matter where I've traveled in this world, all want very much the same thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It doesn't matter the language they speak, the culture they
right.
come from. It's all they all want very similar things. And in business, as you said, you might have a pain point or a challenge or an opportunity you want to grab a hold of. And if somebody can understand that, put themselves in your shoes and have that conversation, they're going to get a lot further down the line
100%.
than doing the opposite. And the reason I think people don't do that, Jason, is because it's called laziness. Um,
Yeah. The path of least resistance
yeah,
is, a path that a lot of people, and it's to a certain extent human nature, right? If I think I can get there without doing all that, I'm going to try it.
yeah,
And I think what we have to try to show people very quickly is that doesn't work. And what you don't want to do is if you're going to try that, I want you to try for a really short period of time. I want you to experience it not working. Now I want you to try it a different way. And I think, but if you're in a larger organization and you try to manage a lot of different people, it's hard sometimes to know where everyone is in their evolution of getting there. And typically how you find out is the numbers don't work. And that's a bad way to find out that it's not working. So, our job is to try to ferret that out way before I realize the numbers aren't working. 'Cause that's a tough spot to try to help someone from. And, we take fairly seriously our commitment when we hire you here. You came here for a reason, and our job is to provide. I always tell people we don't really make great salespeople or great recruiters. They kind of come to us that way, and we can provide a work environment that allows them to be great. And we can tweak it on the margins. Don't get me wrong. We have some good training. We have a really great team. So if you're working with our team, if you're good, you're going to be better because we have some tremendous employees here that are very, very good. So by default, when new people come in, they get the advantage of that. But we really don't take someone and make them great. They had it in them when they got here. All we did was provide the environment for it to flourish and work and
yep,
then to retain them. And that's really when I look at our responsibility It's, yeah, I got to get new people, got to give them the right grounding, the right training, the right philosophical kind of mindset. But to your point, I can't teach you if you're lazy or not lazy. I can't probably change that in you. You're going to have to figure that out on your own. How hard you're going to approach, how much research are you going to really do? Do you go home and work on your job a little bit and set up your day, or do you go home and turn it off your mind and don't think about work? A lot of those are very hard to train. So a lot of our time is, making sure we give everybody the tools. And then a lot of it's, I hate to say a crapshoot, but it's then we figure out how they respond to it.
So I love the fact I'll champion double down before you find out the numbers aren't working, folks.
Yeah.
It's not a fun place to be.
It's not a fun place for anybody, not for us and not for the person.
And I this is not me bragging, but I do want to do a little bit of reinforcement on what you just said because you and I didn't know each other before this podcast. Actually reached out to you cold because you're the type of CEO that I want on this podcast so that people can learn from you. And it took us a little while building a relationship but we're here. So what were some of the things I did right?
Well, yeah, no, it was great. Number one, it was brief and to the point, right? You sent me a really pointed, I guess it was an in-mail on LinkedIn, right?
Yes. Yes.
Kind of telling me what you did. You had a, I mean, it was well written, right? In the sense that you had your credentials enough where I could look it up and say, like, yeah, this is actually his interest. I don't know if you knew I'd done a podcast before or not. I don't do a lot of these. Matter of fact, I probably have done three in the last 5 or 6 years. I
Mhm.
actually enjoy them, but I also am self-aware enough to know that I think I have like some knowledge on a certain amount of topics, but I'm not one of these people who thinks I can go talk about 100 different topics. Like, I don't have a lot to if you came to me for a whole bunch of other reasons, I'd probably say I'm not the best person for that. I'd probably point you to somebody else. I enjoy talking about business. I enjoy talking about scaling of companies, and really, it's fun to talk about. Like, when you sit around with a whole bunch of CEOs, half of what you talk about are the mistakes. Very rarely do you go out with a beer with a whole bunch of CEOs and they all talk about how great everything's going, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
usually more of a bitch fest, right? It's like, let me tell you what I did wrong and how much it cost me and how I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. So you have to be comfortable being okay talking about the stuff you did wrong. And usually these podcasts I find, and based on our conversation, which was kind of what clinched it, was, we're gonna have a Q&A or a conversation versus me having to come prepare a topic to talk about. And because this is the format that I like to do. So to answer, that was a long answer to your question, but it fit the style at which I enjoy doing these, and I don't do a lot of them. So it was nice to be able to find a format that I actually enjoy. I could talk about this for 3 hours. We don't have 3 hours, and your audience would be long gone by 3 hours. You and me could probably do 3 hours and talk about, your history and all the fun things you did and all the dumb things we did over 20 years. Um, but anyway, so that was the reason.
Well, I appreciate that. And folks, I just want you to know I did a lot of research before I contacted you. So like I knew you went to, I think it was Florida International University,
That
if I
is
remember
true.
correctly,
Yeah.
right? What interested me in you was you were a part of, is it called the Piscataqua Advisory Board for a
Yep.
period of time? And I looked up the organization. I looked up the colleges. I looked up I researched your website. I went and found different things. So, folks, the reason I'm telling you this is if you're looking to build high level relationships with really great people, you got to put the work in. You got to put the effort in. If you don't
Right.
put the effort in and you're just pitching your product or service, you're gonna occasionally win,
Right.
but you're
Which is
gonna
almost more dangerous because the occasional win reinforces you doing it the wrong way. One of
yeah.
our worst things to happen, not to interrupt you, but one of the worst things to happen for a new employee is they get a placement and they close the deal in their first 30 days.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we love it, we celebrate it, but at the back of my head, I'm like, oh boy. Like,
I,
I hope we have a lot of really good habits going on. Because if not, we just reinforced a whole bunch of behavior we're going to be fixing when they don't close a deal for, make a placement for 90 days.
Yeah, I had a buddy back when we were working for corporations, and in his first week, he sold one deal that got him a whole year's worth of income.
Right. Worst thing that
And
can happen to his career.
that's exactly what he told me. He struggled for the next 18 months. He couldn't find his footing. He couldn't find his grounding on the whole thing. So, putting in, and you used the word several times here, the discipline over and over on this podcast. And I think that's something that I want everybody to take out of this. The more disciplined you are toward the success principles of what you're doing, you can know everything, but if you're not putting it into play, folks, it's not going to give you the same result. So,
That is definitely true. Yeah, and you have to be able to take some chances, and you have to be able to believe enough in whatever your core thing is that you're doing. If you believe that it's going to work, you have to be able to just to run with it. And I
yeah.
think, again, when you're newer, it's really easy because you don't know any better. The harder part is when you've had some ups and downs, and now you're calculating what happens if this goes wrong. It's really hard to kind of keep. And don't get me wrong, you don't want to do something so, you know, poor decision that can really materially hurt your business. But most of the decisions you make to innovate and do something are not game changers to the point where if they don't work, you can't pivot.
Yeah.
And I think, kind of knowing that, you just have to get out of your comfort zone a little and say, you know what, we're going to try this. We've done that. I could give you 5 examples where we've done it and they didn't all work out, or some of them are still in process. We're not sure if they worked out. Some of them are hard to even calculate an ROI. You're using your gut to figure out if you should still do it. I mean, that's harder, right?
Yep.
Hopefully, with today's new data and ways to calculate ROI, you can get a handle on it. But I mean, you know better than anyone, marketing in certain areas, you don't always have great data to know how it's working. So you're kind of banking if things are going well and you're doing these 5 things, you're not necessarily sure which one of the 5 is really the driver all the time. So sometimes you just have to kind of go with what you feel.
Jason, if somebody wants to reach out to your company, they're like, I need people, I need staffing, I need this, or they want to contact you directly. How would they do so?
I mean, easiest way is obviously they can always reach out to me and I'll get them to the right person. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. Um, we have a website that has an info page where you can either find a recruiter and email them directly or a manager, or you can fill out a contact page. I think our turnaround time and getting back to someone is like 42 minutes. If that comes in, we have it set up that, we have kind of a rule that if someone calls in looking for our services, someone is going to get back to them immediately. And that immediately is usually within an hour. So you would hear from someone. And all of our folks have pretty robust social media, LinkedIn profiles. So if you're looking at the company and you see a recruiter that catches your eye, went to your school, had some connection, used to work with maybe at a different time, or worked at a company where you used to work, you can reach out to them directly, or certainly, go through the website or contact me or any of my partners. I appreciate you asking though.
Oh, no, absolutely. And by the way, folks, check it out. I've read almost, if not every word on your website. It is all real good
Appreciate that.
stuff. And I want to point something out because this you just like grand slam, right? Folks, just listen to what he said. They contact you within an hour.
Yeah,
Speed to
they better be.
contact.
Yeah, we're pretty
Speed,
good at it.
speed to contact is your friend. And,
Certainly.
you
100%.
know,
Yeah, absolutely.
and don't think just because they hit your website or just because they made a phone call to you that they're not making calls to other people who are your competitors. And
Yeah,
usually the first person who gets back is the person who gets the sale.
there's no doubt. Yeah,
So,
yeah. Response time matters.
yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. Jason, thanks for being here on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks for just enlightening people. And I know there's people who are sitting on the side of the road right now going, it
Yeah,
made them really think. So thank you. That
I
was
hope so. Well, thank you. This was great. It's always fun, and I appreciate the invite.
all right, everyone. If you like this episode, please give it a 5-star review. The hardest part of being a founder led CEO sometimes is realizing that the very instincts that saved you at $1 million are the ones that are paralyzing you at wherever you are today 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million. If you're currently making no decision because you're afraid of that mistake, you're not alone. But you're actually choosing to go backwards. See, things are moving forward, especially in today's economy and technology. Things are moving forward at lightning speed. To help you, I created the CEO Sales Strategy Diagnostic specifically to help founders like you identify whether complacency set in and also where is your revenue leaking. Now, all companies tend to have revenue leaking, usually between 15 and 25%, but they've already spent the money to acquire the client, but it's not in the bank account right now, but it's just sitting there waiting for you to get it. Maybe it's because you've been playing too much defense, or maybe for some other reason. Either way, what I will help you do is identify it and then collect it at very high margins for you. So, my request, stop overthinking and let's start scaling again. Let's go get that money back and sell more of your offering. Let's go take action right now. Click the link. Let's have a 15-minute conversation and see if it's right for you. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. To your success.